Valve wants $1,049 for its cheapest Steam machine, and that price does not include Valve's controller. Immediately, the central problem appears: this is not a bad computer, but Valve may have priced away the reason to buy it. Valve's 4K claim, and whether its explanations justify the price. My central question is simple: do those reasons make the machine worth buying, or merely explain why it became expensive? Starting with the package, the entry model includes only 512 GB of storage. Several modern games can exceed 100 GB, so that drive may fill after only a handful of major installations. Adding Valve's controller raises the practical package to $1,128. Separately, the controller costs $99, meaning the bundle saves $20 while the base system still feels incomplete. Inside sits a modern 6-core processor, a mid-range graphics chip, 16 GB of system memory, and 8 GB reserved for graphics. Storage comes in 512 GB or 2 TB. Physically, the machine is a compact cube measuring roughly 6 inches across. Design deserves real credit, because Valve packed capable gaming hardware into a quiet box that fits neatly beneath a television. Owners can replace the drive and memory, which gives the machine more flexibility than a locked console. Think of it as a solid mid-range gaming PC squeezed into a console-sized shell. Now the case looks impressive, but none of that matters if the games struggle, so let us examine the actual performance. Before reading the numbers, understand that these tests use demanding settings and do not prove the machine cannot run modern games. Instead, they reveal how much compromise a buyer may need after paying more than $1,000. PC Gamer tested several titles at 1440p resolution using high or very high settings. Cyberpunk 2077 averaged 16 frames per second with medium ray tracing and no upscaling. Enabling quality upscaling increased that result to 28 frames per second. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora averaged 21 frames per second at 1440p ultra settings. Black Myth: Wukong reached 20 frames per second at very high settings and 31 after quality upscaling. Across those demanding games, the machine generally lands around 20 to 30 frames at those settings. Lowering graphics options improves the experience, but that is exactly the compromise people are judging against a $1,000 price. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition performed better at 45 frames per second on Ultra. Baldur's Gate 3 also reached 46 frames per second, proving the machine is inconsistent rather than universally weak. Casual viewers should know that 30 frames is generally playable, 60 feels much smoother, and anything near 20 feels rough. Context matters because sensible players often reduce expensive effects instead of demanding maximum settings from compact hardware. Dropping to 1080p resolution should improve many games, but that lowers the target beneath the 4K language used to sell the system. Likewise, disabling ray tracing can produce a smoother experience, yet buyers should understand those trade-offs before hearing only the headline promise. Nevertheless, the core criticism survives. A machine costing over $1,000 immediately asks the customer to begin compromising. Overall, the hardware works, but it performs more like a cheaper class of computer than the price suggests. Longevity creates another concern because buyers are not only paying for today's games. 8 GB of graphics memory is usable now, but demanding releases are already pushing that limit at higher settings. 16 GB of system memory also works today, although it no longer feels generous in a premium-priced gaming machine. Evidence does not prove the machine will age badly, but it leaves little spare capacity if future releases become more demanding. Next comes Valve's biggest marketing claim: most Steam games at 4K and 60 frames per second through FSR upscaling. Technically, that statement does not promise native 4K maximum settings or 60 frames in every new release. FSR renders the game below the final resolution and rebuilds the image toward the television's output. Practically, the machine may render below 4K, reconstruct the picture, generate extra frames, and then display a 4K 60 result. Reconstruction can still look good, but it is not the same as running the game natively at those numbers. Average customers hear 4K and 60 frames and imagine a simple, dependable performance standard. Calling Valve's claim false would be unfair, because the machine can reach those targets under the right conditions. Describing the headline as misleading remains reasonable, because those conditions matter more than the slogan. Midway, let us stop and review what Valve is actually selling. Here we have a $1,000 gaming box that needs compromises in demanding games and offers limited spare capacity for future demands. If Valve can justify the cost now, the entire verdict changes. Specifically, Valve's defense has three parts: compact engineering costs more, memory prices exploded, and subsidies threaten openness. Crucially, those points may explain how Valve reached the price. However, the real test is whether they create extra value for the customer. First, compact hardware genuinely costs more to design and build. SteamOS boots directly into a controller-focused interface and removes much of the clutter associated with ordinary Windows computers. Compatibility remains imperfect because some multiplayer games use anti-cheat systems that do not support Linux. Even so, the software offers existing Steam libraries, cloud saves, community layouts, and normal desktop functions. Buyers pay extra for the tiny case, quiet cooling, SteamOS, and reduced setup work. Building something equally small and polished is harder than dropping standard parts into a large desktop case. Still, stronger full-sized gaming computers can cost less while delivering better performance and easier upgrades. Currently, Sony lists the 1TB PlayStation 5 at $649, $400 below Valve's base model before its controller. Beyond the base model, Valve charges $1,349 for the 2TB version without the controller. Bundling that larger model with the controller raises the total to $1,428. Capacity therefore adds $300, although the expensive package also includes decorative faceplates. Second, the hardware market became much worse while Valve was preparing the machine. RAM and solid-state storage prices rose sharply as AI companies and data centers purchased enormous quantities of hardware. Reports indicate that some parts became difficult to obtain and suppliers offered limited stock at harsh monthly prices. Industry shortages are real, so dismissing them as a last-minute excuse would be dishonest. Estimates suggest the base machine might have cost roughly $300 less without the memory crisis. Importantly, that lower figure remains an estimate rather than an official abandoned launch price. Shortages may also affect which memory arrangement customers receive. Certain machines may ship with two 8GB memory sticks, creating the normal dual-channel setup. Others may arrive with one 16GB stick, because Valve could not secure enough matching components. Single-channel memory can reduce memory speed, although Valve says the gaming difference should usually remain small. Workstation programs may suffer more, and buyers will not know which arrangement they receive before opening the box. Customers can add another memory stick later, but that means spending more after already paying a premium. Nothing about checking internal memory after delivery feels like the simple console-style experience being advertised. Strangely, the same machine might have cost hundreds less before the component market changed. Unfortunately, customers cannot purchase that imaginary cheaper version. They can only judge the expensive product that actually exists. Thus, Valve may not control component prices, but buyers still control whether they spend the money. Third, Valve refuses to subsidize the machine through future software sales. Traditional console makers can accept thin hardware margins or losses because closed stores, subscriptions, and licensing generate money later. Management argues that tying hardware subsidies to software revenue could push the product toward a more closed system. Openness has genuine value because owners can install another operating system, replace parts, and use competing stores. Meanwhile, Valve already earns a percentage from huge numbers of games sold through Steam, making that distinction difficult to celebrate. No company owes customers a loss-making product, and demanding permanent charity would be unreasonable. Despite that, the original mission was easier living room PC gaming, and the final price works against that goal. Philosophy explains Valve's position, but it does not improve the frame rate or lower the bill. Limited supply adds one final strange detail. Applicants must join a randomized purchase queue, and only one reservation is allowed per household. Anti-scalper rules are reasonable, but the situation remains absurd. Most lotteries give the winner money. Valve's lottery gives the winner a $1,000 invoice. Realistically, Valve had ways to make the package easier to defend. Including the controller would have made the base model feel complete, while a smaller storage premium would have reduced the painful jump between versions. Alternatively, marketing the system as a premium mini PC instead of an affordable entry point would have established more honest expectations. None of those choices would make the hardware cheap, but each would clarify what customers are actually paying for. Everything now depends on what we compare the Steam machine against. Against a normal desktop, it loses on raw performance and easier future upgrades. Versus a console, it loses on price, simplicity, and predictable game support. Compared with a gaming laptop, it loses portability and the included screen. Beside another tiny living room PC, it becomes far more competitive because compact parts, cooling, and custom design cost more. Collectively, it loses the major mainstream comparisons and only becomes convincing when size, silence, and SteamOS become the buyer's main priorities. Longtime Steam users also carry an invisible advantage. They already own games, preserve cloud saves, and understand the interface. New customers receive none of that accumulated value, so the same hardware asks them to pay full price before its ecosystem benefits begin. That comparison reveals the real target customer. Someone with limited cabinet space, a large Steam library, sensitivity to noise, and no interest in building may genuinely love this machine. Functionally, the premium buys convenience rather than speed, and only certain households will value that trade. So is Valve's $1,049 Steam machine actually worth buying? For most buyers, no. Typical buyers get more power from a normal desktop, while a console offers cheaper simplicity. Anyone interested but unconvinced should wait for lower component prices, discounts, or a future hardware revision rather than forcing the purchase now. This machine only makes sense for people who value tiny size, quiet operation, SteamOS, and living room convenience above raw performance. Ultimately, Valve built the polished computer it wanted but failed to build the affordable entry point many customers expected. Finally, are you buying Valve's convenience, building a stronger desktop, or choosing a console and keeping the difference?